Good Wednesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock in time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Browns and Eagles with a day off in Philadelphia, getting ready for the Browns' third preseason game. That would be tomorrow night in Philadelphia against the Eagles. None of the starters expected to play as they went through those joint practices. Jason Kelce, Cleveland Heights native, center for the Eagles, talked about what he saw from the Browns' defensive line in those joint practices.
Listen, you're not going to find a better, end-to-end duo in this league. The way Miles rushes the passer and his just pure physicality, how he moves and bends and all that. Za'Darius can do it all too. I mean, he can rush from the edge. He can run games unbelievably. It's no shocker that they have a phenomenal defensive front. I think Dalvin Tomlinson's a very underrated player, has been for a long time. They just signed Shelby Harris. They have good players across the board. Linebackers fly around. So, we knew what we were getting in store for, and it's a good test for us. And, I think Jordan got better this week. I got better. Lane got better. I think that's the name of this game.
With that, let's welcome in Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, it's one thing when we say it. It's another thing when you hear a guy that's on the offensive line of one of the best offensive lines talk about the Browns' defensive front. Those are the kind of things you want to hear coming out of the joint practices.
Well, yeah, and Jason, I think, is a future Hall of Famer. I mean, he's played at a high level for a long time, and he doesn't have anything really a reason to praise the Browns other than, it was his hometown team. But as far as the Browns have overhauled that position now with Shelby Harris, and 3 of the 4 starters, actually 4 of the top 5 on the defensive line, are new, and they were all major upgrades in my opinion. And so we talked about Jim Schwartz, this being the focal point of his defensive philosophy is a deep defensive front that can rush the passer. And I think you have 4 or 5 proven commodities there, and some guys on the inside now with Harris and Tomlinson that can stop the run. And that was a major problem we saw last year when the Browns played the Eagles in practice. The Eagles just ran through them. And this year, they put up much more of a stout resistance, and I think that bodes well for the regular season.
Well, Myles Garrett practiced day 1, had a foot injury that isn't expected to keep him sidelined much. Garrett talked about the benefits of the joint practices against the Eagles, especially for the offensive line that he was going against.
I mean, you want to see a lot of different looks as far as offensive line, just because that's what you're going to face. Not everyone's going to set the same. They have a pretty unique scheme. At least compared to some of the other teams we'll face in the league, and allows us to have some liberties we wouldn't face against our own team, and that gives us a different look and some adjustments that we weren't able to really see while we were playing each other. It's the way they were set and the way they were kicking allows for us to see if stuff will work a little bit further down the line and prepare us for the season.
Miles, I was listening to Jason Kelce talk over there to his media session, and he said that this D-line was one of the better end-to-end D-lines in the league. To hear that from a guy like Kelce, what does that mean?
It means a lot. He's seen a whole lot. He's been around for a while, and he's played against some really good ones. So, and definitely it's an honor coming from him. But we gotta make the most of it. We appreciate the words, but we got to keep on putting the work in.
And again, Fred, it's what you want to hear from Myles Garrett. Myles didn't practice yesterday when the Eagles had the better of it. Day 1, even the Eagles beat reporters were saying Eagles couldn't block him. Nobody was blocking Myles Garrett.
Yeah, well, that was even before he went out. And then he, like you said, he went to the side and sat out the rest. And even the guys behind him were voting the rush was Za'Darius Smith and Obo Okoronkwo and some of the other guys. And so I think it's what we've been saying. If you can get a pass rush that you're not relying on Myles Garrett. I said it before. The Browns only had 20 sacks last year from their edge rushers, and 16 came from Myles Garrett. So he literally had no other help. If they have to double Garrett, I think this is Darius Smith, is right there with Garrett, and he'll eat them alive. And they can't double everybody. Now you have a presence on the inside with Thomas and Shelby Harris, but Obo Okoronkwo is an up and coming, rising star at edge as well. And we've seen Jim Schwartz have all three of those edge outside guys in there at times. So I just think that it bodes well. I think that, to me, that was one of the strong points of the joint practices, to see how they stacked up. Last year, the defense couldn't stop Jalen Hurts and the Eagles in the run or even in the pass. This year, the defense, I think, held its own and played pretty well, to be honest.
What are your takeaways? I had said that I wanted to see that defense. That was one of the things I was listening out for. We heard it in day one. But what are your takeaways from the 2 days of joint practice? We're not going to see any of the regulars in the preseason game.
No, you're not going to see them against the Eagles, and I don't know if you'll see much of them in the final one with the Chiefs. So they looked at these 2 days as being the apex of training camp. And those 2 days of practice is when they really wanted the ones to go against the ones of the Eagles and to be able to measure up where they stood. This team went to the Super Bowl last year. They had the number one defense in the NFL, I believe. And the offense, I think, had some problems against the Eagles' defense. But I think the Browns' defense played pretty well and stacked up pretty well against the Eagles' offense, which is pretty good in its own right. So I think the Browns are closing the gap from what they did last year, but I think that's a good standard. If you got the best team in the NFC, at least on paper and projections for this year, that if you can play with them, you know where you're at and you know your shortcomings. And so with a month before the season, even if you're struggling on the offensive side of the ball, I think it allows you to tune up and get ready, get everybody healthy, and be ready to go September 10th when the regular season kicks off.
And keep in mind, the offense that the Browns are going to run this year drastically different than what they ran last year. So some of that is, the learning curve to get Deshaun Watson comfortable with what Kevin Stefanski and those guys are going to do this year as well. This was from CBS Sports. Good, bad, and ugly from each team. Week 1 preseason, that's what they're calling the Commanders game. The good, Deshaun Watson looked more comfortable than he did in any of the 6 games in 2022. The bad and the ugly, Cade York missed his only field goal attempt of the night, pushing 46-yard attempt wide right. Also missed a 49-yard attempt in similar fashion at the Hall of Fame game. They say Cleveland might have a kicker problem. I agree with Watson. I saw a guy that looked like it was his offense, which is what I wanted to see. Just your takeaway. We heard there are some issues in the red zone against the Eagles again. I think I hope those things will get sorted out as the season goes along.
Well, you'd rather get them, have some glaring issues a month from the season against the top defense, and then know that you have some areas to work on, as opposed to sail right along and think, wow, everything's great, we're just going to show up, and sail through this, because we know that isn't how it goes. I think Watson said he feels comfortable. Rust is no more an issue, and I do think that he'll play his way back. I was surprised that he even played a series after the rain the other night and the hour delay. Even after you get ramped up to play the game, then when you sit for over an hour, just getting stretched in that, you'd be afraid of hamstrings or slipping and falling. But I thought he looked good in that first series. Obviously not great because they didn't get a touchdown, but I don't really think it was his fault. They got to the 1 yard line, and then you hand the ball to Demetric Felton and John Kelly. I don't think you're necessarily going to do that when you have Nick Chubb, Amari Cooper, Joel Bitonio sitting on the sideline, if that's in a regular season game. And so I'm not thinking that this was a negative. I think that you saw him command the offense, and I think that he's comfortable. I think he will play his way into shape, and really, again, like I've said, I think Jim Schwartz's defense has played pretty well. And if they can come out and even buy time for the offense to get up to speed, I think that will go a long way. Because if you remember last year, the offense wasn't great, but they played well enough, even with Jacoby Brissett, to win several games that the defense gave up the lead late.
How concerned are you with Cade York? Obviously, it's not ideal, but at what point in time do you start, moving towards finding a possible solution?
Well, I get this a lot of questions. You probably get it too, but I watch him. I watched him for 2 training camps. He's got the leg. He booms everything through. I just think it's one of those things, kind of like golf. If you shank it, once you hit it right and you get back on track, I think you're fine. It was a good sign that he finished yesterday 6 of 6. I think he made a 47, a 49, and a 54 to close out practice. And I know it wasn't a game, but when you're going, with your 90 guys on your own team against 90 guys on the Eagles, they're all watching. Those are your peers. I have to think peer pressure there is just as big as it is, going out there in a stadium, as far as, because you don't want to let your coaches, your players, everything down. He knows what's at stake and the confidence they have in him. But with that being said, most NFL games, it's proven, come down, the average point differential is about 6 points or so. And you cannot have your offense, your defense with playoff aspirations and have games come down and your kicker cost you the game. So they're saying all the right things. He's got a month to get ready, but if he's still struggling, in their opinion, when the season starts, I would not be surprised that they brought in, I looked around, there's 8 to 10 teams that have veterans that are being challenged by draft pick kind of rookies that they'll probably go with the draft pick. And if a Robbie Gould becomes available, or if he is available, or guys of that sort that have been there, done that can just show up and kick, I would not be surprised if they brought them in right to start the season. And maybe Cade York, I don't think they were ready to give up on him any stretch of the means. He might go on an injury reserve, maybe has a mysterious calf injury or something like that. So I think, there's concern, but I don't think in their mind, they think that he'll get this all worked out. It's important for him in the next 2 games to put their minds at ease that he can make the field goals when the lights are on.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, I'm a longtime Browns fan living out of state. I've seen a couple of games, and the kick return game does not look good with Forbes, Belton, and Donovan People-Jones doing it. Why won't they give Jalen Darden a chance? He's very elusive, he's very fast, he's very edgy. Jalen Darden, when are they going to give him a chance to return the punts and kicks? Thanks.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Fred, the thing with Darden's been banged up a little bit. I think that's one of the reasons. Then you have Jakeem Grant, who, if he's healthy, he was a Pro Bowler. So Darden's in that mix, but, they don't want to put somebody back at kicks and get them even more banged up than they are already.
Well, it's a good question, but yes, Jalen Darden went off the field in West Virginia way back in Greenbrier with a leg injury. We don't know the extent of that because they don't give a lot of information, but he has been on the side with trainers with a sleeve on his right leg. So whether it's a thigh or a hamstring or whatever, that's his leg is what got him to the NFL. So with that said, that's the plan. Jakeem Grant or Jalen Darden to be the returner. They went out last year and paid pretty good money to get Jakeem Grant, a 3-time Pro Bowler, and he ruptured his Achilles on a non-contact drill about this time last year in training camp, running down the field. I watched him, and he just pulled up. Now, the question is he ready to, is he back to 100% where he was? I watched him in West Virginia, and I did some videos of him. He looked very quick, and he looked like he was back. But they have held him out of team drills until just before they went to Philly. He hasn't played in a game, and the same way with Darden. So I would not be surprised if they give one or both of those guys work in these final 2 preseason games. The decision comes down to, if all players are healthy, they're both wide receivers. And is there enough room for a wide receiver on this team? You know, the questions like Marquise Goodwin. If Marquise Goodwin is ready to play come the season, you have to figure their top 5, if not top 6 wide receiver positions are already set, with Cedric Tillman this year and David Bell last year to go with Elijah Moore, Marquise Goodwin, Peoples-Jones, and Amari Cooper. So can you keep a 7th wide receiver that doubles as your returner? Or do you put them on practice squad and elevate them for the game? I don't know. These are questions they have to decide in the next couple of weeks. But then it comes down to, let's say Jakeem Grant is 100%. He's 30 years old. Do you go with him or a 23-year-old Jalen Darden, who doesn't have the credentials yet, but might be very similar to Grant, but he's a lot younger and a lot less expensive? So they do have decisions to make, but they've not been able to put them on the field and really gauge them yet. So I think that will be one of the decisions in the next couple of weeks they have to make.
So Joel Bitonio was asked after yesterday's practice. By all accounts, the offense has struggled in red zone, both red zone drills, both against the Browns defense and against the Eagles defense in the joint practices. So Bitonio was asked, is he concerned with the red zone offense?
We're working through it. You know, I think our defense sees the concepts that we're running in practice. So they saw it throughout OTAs, they saw it throughout minicamp. We have some good players on defense, so they find some things. You know, today we didn't convert as much as we wanted. But I think it's stuff we're working through. You know, I think you want to see your defense compete early in camp because they usually have a step up on the offense. But I think we're working our way through, and I am not concerned at this moment about it.
Fred, the other thing is you haven't seen a lot of Nick Chubb, and you're not gonna use Nick Chubb in those situations because that's undue strain on his body, and they're not game planning anything. So you'd like it to be better, but it's not time to go, hey, they're not going to be able to score. I don't think you're at that point yet. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not concerned. Like you said, that's number one weapon is Nick Chubb. You know, the threat of him, you know, running the ball inside or wherever. You haven't seen him, and you haven't had Mari Cooper out there, and you just really haven't worried. Like you said, you're going against your own defense, against the Eagles, number 1 defense in the NFL, and it gets a little tighter inside the 20. Again, I'd rather have them struggle now than in a month, and gives them a little time, and they get to look and say, look, we're struggling. We need to figure this out, as opposed to the other way around. Does you no good if you get touchdowns on every play now and think you haven't made. I think this will make them work even the harder. But I'm not concerned until I see, you know, come September 10th, you know, against the Bengals with a full complement of your offensive line and your weapons.
So we talked a little bit about Deshaun Watson last segment. It looked good against the Commanders, kind of uneven against the Eagles. You heard the interception. It's not fair to expect him to be boom in your back, but are you concerned at all about what you have seen with Watson and his ability to get back to that elite level that the Browns gave up 3 first-round picks to get?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, until they start playing real games, it's hard to know, you know, if he's going to get back to the elite level. And and I go back to the defense, it might take a few more games of him. Now, obviously, they're playing the Bengals and the Steelers and the Ravens in 3 of the first 4, so you have to get back quickly. But I think that he'll figure it out if he isn't ready to go from the get-go. But I think the defense can keep you in games and allow you to, to get everybody on the same page. With that being said, I will say this, and this is no disrespect to Lamar Jackson, but if Watson just has the ability to escape and to use his legs and to get out of the pocket and make things happen, in this passing game by prolonging plays, we've seen with Lamar Jackson, he's not really a premier in the pocket passer, and he has done quite well. In fact, he was MVP. So you have that going for you, is that you have the mobility of Deshaun Watson, even if he's not elite throwing out of the pocket to start the season. I think he'll figure it out. I've seen too much, of him in practice, back in the off season, as well as even at Greenbrier and in training camp in Berea. I think he'll figure this out.
Fred Greetham and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear more from Myles Garrett. Continue talking Browns. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. The Browns signed Shelby Harris. His first workouts were those joint practices. Myles Garrett on what he has seen Shelby Harris bring to this defense.
I mean, he plays with a lot of passion. He's fiery, and right now he's getting his feet underneath him and working his hands really well. He has a lot of knowledge of the game coming out and being able to do a variety of moves, and he'll let you tell that he's not where he wants to be, but we know from how he's spoken in the classroom and how he talks the game while he's out there, coaching up the younger guys, and that it's just about him getting in that game, game-like form and shape for him.
Fred, the other added thing that we've talked about it a little bit, adding guys like Harris and Tomlinson and Smith, in addition to Myles Garrett. Now these younger guys have guys that can, they'll pick up tips and see what it takes to have a successful NFL career. I don't know that you could have said that with anybody other than Myles Garrett before.
Exactly. Shelby Harris started out 7th-round pick and didn't play much early in his career, and then he really came on, and he was a big part of that Russell Wilson trade from the Broncos, to the Broncos. He went to the Seahawks, and he brings experience. I think this is his 10th season in the NFL, and he's been productive, even from the inside. He's a run stopper, but he's also had, I think, 24.5 career sacks. He had 6 2 years ago with the Broncos in their scheme. And I just think that was the one position I felt they had 21 of the 22 starters set going into training camp. And the one that I still thought was questionable was the Jordan Elliott. And now I think with Shelby Harris, they might say Elliott's the starter, but I think Shelby Harris, once he's ready to go, will be the starter. But it gives you more depth in the rotation. Here's a run stopper. He can give you inside pass rush, plus depth. If you have an injury, as you always do, in the interior to Elliott or Tomlinson or even Harris, you got Maurice Hurst, who's looked pretty good, and you drafted Siaki Ika in the 3rd round. So I think now you have depth, and the young guys can learn from these guys. I think this front 4 is strong, and you look at the depth. I like it. I like not having last year when Garrett got hurt and say Clowney, he was always out. You had to start Alex Wright and guys, Isaiah Thomas, guys that didn't have any experience. Now you have guys that have been there, done that. And I think that will bode well, especially the way Jim Schwartz wants to attack. So I think it's a big move. And I think on defense, these last three moves, the Darius Smith trade, and then the signing of Rodney McLeod, the safety, and then the signing of Shelby Harris are three big moves. Maybe some of the most important that Andrew Berry's made this offseason.
Yeah, those three moves tell me they're in win now mode. Those are guys that can help a team get to where they want to be, which is the playoffs. This is from Sports Illustrated. 5 main benefits that operating out of the shotgun will provide Nick Chubb and Cleveland's rushing attack. They go lateral play faking and deception. So that's a Deshaun Watson kind of ball handling thing. More receivers on the field equals fewer defenders in the box. Again, he's used to running into 8- and 9-man boxes, Nick Chubb. It forces defense to use smaller personnel. When you look at those three, again, Nick Chubb has averaged over 5 yards a carry running into stacked and loaded boxes. You would think that would afford him to rush for more yards per carry.
Absolutely. We talked to Chubb about that, and he said that, he's looking forward to it. It doesn't bother him. In fact, statistics have shown that backs out of the shotgun have, operated pretty well. And listen, you get the ball to Nick Chubb, whether it's, out of the shotgun or standard, offensive backfield or in the passing game and spread it out. I just think he's such a big weapon. And I've said it before, I think, no disrespect to Kareem Hunt, but when Kareem Hunt was on the team, they always brought him in on third down. I think if you bring or leave Nick Chubb on the field and use him as an outlet, he's such a weapon that somebody has to cover him. And you get him the ball out in the flat, one-on-one with a linebacker or even a smaller defensive back, I'd say good luck to the defender. I think that he can go to the house on any play. I just keep thinking, remember in that Steeler playoff game, Baker Mayfield dumped a screen to Chubb. He went 40 yards looked like he was shot out of a rocket for a touchdown. I just think he's been underused in the passing game. And Stump Mitchell, the running back coach, said that they're going to use him on third down this year, and I think that's good. So if there's a negative on not having a Kareem Hunt and you don't really have a proven second back, a positive is they realize they got a great weapon in Nick Chubb, and I think you'll use him more in the passing game, and I think out of the shotgun that will open things up.
So the last two parts of that, the 5 benefits, we looked at 3 of them. These 2 are kind of together as well. Allows the offense to read specific defenders if they're having trouble blocking them. That would be Deshaun Watson, the RPO run-pass option. And 5, Deshaun Watson can become a designated run threat, which would take some of the load off Nick Chubb in terms of defenses being able to key on him as the only rushing threat. And again, those 2 are things we haven't seen. You're not going to see a lot in the preseason because you don't want your quarterback taking hits when the games don't matter.
Well, like I said, I was surprised he's only in for one series the other night, and he ran 3 times, I don't think they were all called for. And you don't want your quarterback running 15, 20 times. But I do think that is such a threat. If they all go for Chubb, he's going to take that 10, 15 yards or run to the sideline and get 7 or whatever it might be. So I just think that the more weapons you have on the field, the more it keeps the defense honest, and they can't cover them all in the passing game. I mean, if you have 4 or 5, 6 pass threats, I would take my chances with the number 6 pass defender on Chubb or Njoku or whoever you want to name. So they just can't cover them all. And then you have that threat that Watson can take off if they have them all spread out. So we'll see. It's up to Kevin Stefanski to make sure that he gets this all, implemented properly.
Before I let you go, this from the Bleacher Report. What each NFL head coach on the hot seat must accomplish in 2023 to keep his job. They say Kevin Stefanski must make the playoffs. Browns have had talented rosters past couple of years and underperformed. Even if you're willing to give the team a mulligan for 2022 because of Deshaun Watson and the suspension for the first 11 games, Cleveland hasn't met expectations since that playoff run in the eyes of many. Underperforming is probably fair. Now, you didn't have a healthy quarterback or what you would consider a number one quarterback. I don't think you can say if Kevin Stefanski misses the playoffs, they're going to move on from him because it depends on the circumstances. Tell me why.
Well, yeah, asked Jimmy Haslam that down in West Virginia. It's going to depend on how it goes. They got a very strong division, AFC North. I mean, what happens if you go 11-6 and you don't make the playoffs because the division winner's 12-5 and there's some very good AFC teams. Now, I think that should get you in the playoffs, but it really is how you go. Think of the 11-game suspension last year. Okay, if Joe Burrow missed, now he's probably going to be ready for the opener, but let's say that calf injury cost him the first 11 games. Does anybody think the Bengals are going to win the division or necessarily go to the playoffs? Do you fire Zach Taylor because they don't? So no, I think it's on Stefanski. They have went out and overhauled the defense and the offense and given Watson what he needs. It's going to be how they produce. And if they just go out there and lay an egg completely, yeah, I can see them moving on. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why is they have Jim Schwartz on this staff. There was not a coach, in my opinion, that was ready to be a head coach or to take over, prior to this year. And I think Jim Schwartz, defensive coordinator, is running that side of the ball, and he could easily step in if they feel that the offense and overall the team underperforms. But if you have key injuries that cost you the season, it's kind of unfair. But I don't see that happening right now. I think they're very confident in Kevin Stefanski, and they also feel that he and Barry, work well together. But if this team goes out and goes 6-11, like a lot of the national people project, oh yeah, I think they would move on from him for sure, because I think they're expecting playoffs.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, is always great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Fred.
You're welcome.
Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. Great stuff on the Orange and Brown Report as well. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Casey Kinnamon, Dog Pound Daily. Sports for CLE, we'll be right back talking more Browns. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Former NFL defensive back Jason McCourty, now of the NFL Network's Good Morning Football, was on the Rich Eisen Show and was asked, which NFL team aren't we talking enough about?
I've been talking about this team kind of throughout the offseason, the Cleveland Browns. They're a team for Deshaun Watson last year. We didn't talk about the Cleveland Browns because of him. And now there's a team where he's had a year where he was rusty last year, missed games because of his suspension, because of what he did at his time between Houston and Cleveland. And now he'll be back playing football an entire offseason. That one of the best running backs in the NFL, Myles Garrett, and then adds Darius Smith. I think this is a team in a really good division with Baltimore, with Cincinnati, that can surprise a few people. And it's just like, wow, I didn't really realize that Cleveland was going to be in the thick of everything, to be in the playoffs and make a run. They're a team that I'm like, all right, I have my finger on to watch how they come out, how they start the season, and see how far they can grow from last year, because Stefanski, you talk about coaching and everything that's gone on since he's been there. You get to the playoffs and have a good year right away, and it hasn't really been the same since. So he added Jim Schwartz on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're going to need to make great strides for him and his job security there. But I just think they have a ton of talent, and they can be a little scary this year in the league.
With that, let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon, Dog Pound Daily. Casey, as we get closer and closer and you see more and more, you hear former players, Browns are a team that could be a surprise team.
Yeah, Dave, I'm starting to think they're talking a little too much about the Browns now. I would rather them stay on the down low and kind of sneak up on teams. But McCourty's not wrong. The recognition of the talent is there. When you do have a Myles Garrett, you have a Nick Chubb on your team, and you make the additions as Zadarius Smith, and then, you go get Jim Schwartz to turn the heat up on that defense. Like, the expectation is there. I just prefer, they would kind of stay on the down low and be able to sneak up on the league, but I don't think that's going to be in the cards for them.
Yeah, the thing is, they need to get off to a good start, and if they do, watch the bandwagon. There aren't going to be enough seats on it if they win a couple early.
Yeah, I just want to let's get to September 10th. Let's get there and start putting it on teams, and then get that recognition.
All right, this is from the Bleacher Report. Why every NFL team could finish last in 2023. Browns, 7 or 8 wins could still result in a 4th place finish in the North. That could easily be Cleveland's ceiling, considering it's topped that total just once in the last 15 years. Plus, Deshaun Watson is a wild card who hasn't participated in full season since 2020. Well, I get it. Saying that they haven't had more than 7 or 8 wins once in 15. Well, they also haven't had a good roster and a good quarterback in the last 15 years.
Yeah, kind of, using that kind of designation of what they did in the past to predict what's going on in the future doesn't, really transfer when you're talking about players who weren't here, 4 or 5 years ago. And I agree with this overall premise that 7 or 8 wins could finish 4th place in this division. That just speaks to how talented the AFC North is. But I just disagree that could easily be Cleveland's ceiling. I think 8 wins is the floor. I think the ceiling's 12 or 13 wins. Now, everything would have to break right, and it's the NFL, and things don't always go the way you want them to. But I think 8 wins, 8 wins would be massive injuries happening. I think that's the base. I think that's the floor for this team.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking. The only way 8 wins happens is if you have a couple of major injuries, because there's some depth to this roster. They have to stay healthy. The defense, I think, is going to be a handful. I had said, if we start hearing coming out of those joint practices, and we did. You started hearing the Eagles talking about, this, and the Eagles beat reporters. Those are not guys that they throw around, compliments like hubcaps, or they actually, and they thought, the Browns defense looked good.
Yeah, against a very competent Eagles offensive line, who you could argue is the best in the league. They were still getting that pass rush, getting crazy pressure on Hurts. I think that's that's what we needed to hear coming out of those joint practices. People get caught up in they won this day or they lost this day. Man, they went and competed with the best in the league. That's what's going to happen. You're going to get got, and as long as you're able to get yours, that's a great sign.
Yeah, and again, the Eagles roster is probably viewed as being better than the Chiefs. The Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, which is kind of the great equalizer, which, that leads into our next topic about quarterbacks. So this is from a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and media brethren. Browns have not finished with a better record than the Steelers in over 30 years. All right, let's take a look at the Browns quarterbacks the last 30 years. So starting in 2010, Couch, Detmer, Peterson, Spurgeon, Wynn, Kelly, Holcomb, Garcia, McCown, Dilfer, Fry. This is painful. Derek Anderson had a couple of good years. Colt McCoy, Delhomme, Seneca Wallace. Time to go to another page. We're only halfway there, and it gets worse. Brandon Whedon, Thad Lewis, Campbell, Hoyer, McCown, Johnny Manziel, Austin Day. Okay, you get the idea. During that same period of time, you know what the quarterback list for the Pittsburgh Steelers was Tommy Maddox, Ben Roethlisberger, and now you've got Kenny Pickett. I'm not sold on Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett looks like he belongs more on that list we just showed you than Ben Roethlisberger, Tommy Maddox.
Yeah, it's just such proof that it is a quarterback-driven league. And Steelers fans, please hear me. You walk around this air of superiority like your team just owns the Browns. No. Ben Roethlisberger owned the Browns, no doubt. I mean, he did what he did. That really happened. If you take Roethlisberger's career off the table, the Browns lead the all-time series 60-54. Roethlisberger's gone. That era is over. Stop living in the past. It starts now. You guys went 1-1 last year. For me, success is going into Pittsburgh week 2 and putting it on them. Establish yourself. I think that's how you establish a new era, win in their building, which is something the Browns historically haven't done. And as far as Pickett, man, I need the Browns to let them love Pickett. Let's let Steelers think that that's their guy. The best thing that could happen is for the Steelers to be in quarterback purgatory for 6 years while the Browns put it on them season after season.
Yeah, again, you had, and Maddox was okay, but before Maddox, you had another elite quarterback. You've had a good run of quarterbacks. That's why you have been so successful. And the Browns have not solved that problem. And they passed on Ben Roethlisberger. So that makes it even that much worse.
Yeah, that makes it hurt more.
Casey Kinnamon and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll hear from Jason Kelce on the joint practices with the Browns. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily. Browns wrapped up 2 days of joint practices with the Eagles, a day off for the Browns and Eagles. Preseason game tomorrow. None of the regulars on either side are going to play. Jason Kelce on what he saw in those 2 days of joint practices with the Browns.
They did some good things in the first day. Certainly threw us off guard. I thought they had a lot of really good energy. And, I think all of us as an offense, we're excited to get back out here and go to work. And, that's how you want to respond. I think that guys are fired up to get back out on the field. And, had a much better day today. And we're just going to keep on trying to improve. That's the name of this game. Nobody right now is good enough to win the Super Bowl. Everybody's got to keep getting better.
And again, Casey, that's kind of the message. It's, August, okay, get better.
Yeah, and that's why those joint practices were huge. It's just the competition, and you get to change it up. It's one thing to go against your guys day in and day out, where they kind of know your plays, they kind of know what you like to do to get fresh looks. And then you're talking about the Eagles, and that's the tip of the spear offensive line, especially that interior, which is the things I was most excited about going into those joint practices was the experiences of the line of scrimmage on both sides. The Browns are going to find out about their defensive tackles going against that Eagles interior. And to hear that they took it to them on the first day, that's very encouraging, because that was a kind of an emphasis of contention from last year's. They kind of let the Eagles dictate. Well, the Browns dictated going into the practices. And then they made the Eagles pivot and things, played out the way they did. But that's all part of the experience.
All right, this from Dog Pound Daily, 4 takeaways from the Browns' joint practices with the Eagles. Number 4, Amari Cooper did not have his best day, first day on Monday. DeJuan Jones is going to be a star. Number 2, the DBs had their hands full but held their own. Number 1, Browns' offensive line had their hands full. And again, Conklin was banged up, didn't participate as much. But Eagles' defensive line is among the best. That's one of the reasons they're the favorites. None of that is really concerning. I don't know. I think it's early to. I like what I see from DeJuan Jones, but I'd slow down on naming him a starter or any of that.
Yeah, I'll slow the roll in calling him a star, but everything's got to be so encouraging. Like I've always thought this about DeJuan Jones. If he wants to be great, he will be great. He has everything you need, and he could have landed in a better situation. You know, he's not going to have to take on everything all right away. He gets to play behind Jack Conklin. He gets Bill Callahan to oversee his development. You know, and then you see the stuff he was doing in practice. And I'm not going to speak on whether he won or lost the rep against Brandon Graham, because that seems to be an area of contention. But he competed, man. He got out there, and that's a former All-Pro in Brandon Graham, you know, and he was able to stay in front of him. And that kind of experience will only help him grow. And just slow the roll, let him develop at his own pace. But I definitely think that if he wants to be great, it's on the table for him.
He certainly wasn't overmatched, with what you're talking about. And you know what? He's a fourth-round pick. He's not supposed to come in 2 weeks into training camp, 3 weeks into training camp, be stalemating somebody of that stature. If he is, looks like you got a pretty good draft pick.
Yeah, he's already ahead of schedule. You know, I wouldn't try to propel him further than he needs to be, because there might come a time in the season they need him to step in. You know, so just let him build naturally how it's going, because it seems to be going well. You know, I don't think we need to propel him any further into that.
Anything that came out of the joint practices that concerned you? I wanted to hear that they went in and kind of did well. You know, last year you heard they didn't do well. They had finished up with the Dolphins, and the big thing was Dolphins were way ahead of the Browns, and it kind of played out that way in the regular season.
Yeah, no major areas of concern. You know, you hear things you would rather they played out a little differently. You know, I guess there was a lot of pressure on day 2, and Watson went through a couple interceptions off tip balls. You know, he definitely needs to protect the ball, but that's his practice. I'm not going to act like it was a life or death situation, like he was trying to make a play and then things happen. So you want to hear things are just staying on an upward trajectory, and you would rather them finish strong. They seem to start strong in these practices, but they really took it to the Eagles and, you know, made them mad basically. And the Eagles came out on day 2, you know, with something to play for. And then we're talking about practice. You know, you hurt their egos on day 1, and they defended themselves in day 2. I just hope they're able to keep this thing going, because they meet up in a regular season next year. So I really hope they meet up in preseason for some more joint practices next year. Could be entertaining.
You're sounding like Allen Iverson. You're talking about practice.
About practice.
All right. Tyler Johnson tweets this out. The 2020 Deshaun Watson statistically best season. These were the weapons that he had with the Texans. He had running back David Johnson, wide receiver Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Randall Cobb, Cote, and Darren Fells. With the Browns, he's got Chubb, Cooper, Peoples-Jones, Moore, Cedric Tillman, David Njoku. The other thing is the offensive line, as much as the Browns are reportedly struggling, it is light years ahead of what the Texans had. I know they had Laramie Tunsil, but that's about all they had.
Yeah, it's an undeniably upgrade for Watson in all areas, from offensive line to skill positions everywhere. And I just don't know if we need to base it on statistics, though.
Right.
Because even with all that being said, this is the most talent he's ever played with. I don't think that automatically equates to just better statistics because of the situation. You know, in 2020, the Texans were down. They were playing from behind in a lot of second halves, and he was throwing the ball all over the yard to try to get back in games. I don't think the game script's going to kind of work the same way. I think you're going to see most of his throwing happening in the first half of games and third quarters of games. I think if everything plays out the way it should, in the fourth quarter of games, they're going to be trying to put teams away, and you're not going to be doing that by chucking the ball all over the yard.
You don't want him to, you want to have Nick Chubb running the ball in the fourth quarter with the lead. You don't want Deshaun Watson to, but you want that ability to say, all right, here's the ball. We feel pretty, if we have the ball last, we feel pretty good that he's going to find a way to get us in the end zone or in field goal range. If you have that from the quarterback, you're getting what you want.
That's the great equalizer in the NFL. When you have a quarterback that when he has to can go out there and just execute, get first downs, get you in a position to win. And that's why you pay a quarterback. That's exactly what they need to be. is they need to be able to do that with the game on the line. And, to have that in your back pocket is a bonus. I don't think we need to be worried about whether he throws 4,800 yards. It's all about wins and losses.
And if you look no further than the last couple of years, there were games that were there to be won in the fourth quarter for the Browns last year and the year before. They didn't win.
Yeah, all comes down to execution. And you have to have a quarterback that has that kind of pedigree that puts fear in defenses when you do have the ball last. When you feel like, oh man, this doesn't feel good, And the Browns finally have a quarterback with that kind of capability. Now it's all about proving it on the field.
Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear more from Myles Garrett about the joint practices with the Eagles. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
Browns with a player's day off, getting ready for their third preseason game against the Eagles in Philadelphia tomorrow night. After the joint practices, Myles Garrett on the benefit the Browns' young defensive lineman got from going against the Eagles O-line.
Going against big-time talent like they were, they're getting looks that you don't always get to get. You're going to get Joel and Jed and Jack and DeJuan. All those guys are really good, but that's only one set you're seeing. You're seeing a variety of different skill sets, from a different team who's very talented at what they do, and that allows you to start adapting to what else you're going to see in the league, and it starts to create a little bit of a variety of your pass rush moves and what you see really works for you and what works for you across the board instead of just one style.
And Casey, the young guys now have people to follow. The defensive line, Andrew Berry did a great job. Harris is a nice fit with Tomlinson. You got Zadarius Smith, Okunrankwo. They complement Garrett. There is the pieces there to be dominant for Jim Schwartz.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew Berry doesn't get enough credit for. There are certain positions he's had better luck with than others, and defensive tackle, for whatever reason, has been a blind spot to those guys, especially in the draft. But through free agency, I think will be a different route. I think that you go get a Dalvin Tomlinson who kind of gives you one body type, and then you go get a Shelby Harris, and these guys are kind of interchangeable that they can play 1 and 3 technique, and so to kind of get those guys together gives you a solid defensive interior. And then now this will allow someone like Siaka Ika to kind of come along at his own pace. They don't need to throw him out there. Now they can if the situation calls for it and they need a run stuffer, but they have all the pieces and all the parts. And to go up against another team like the Eagles, who, from top to bottom, that offensive line is solid, and to get those live reps, because when you go against your own team, they understand your moves, you understand theirs. There's a certain knowledge there going into those practices that you don't have kind of flying blind against a team like the Eagles when you don't know how they're going to recover. You don't know how their pass sets are going to be or how they like to handle certain moves. So I think those kind of lessons are invaluable.
Yeah, and you get to see, well, this move didn't work. Don't do that.
Yeah, you have to have a plan B. You got to be able to pivot. Like Miles said, you have to switch things up. And you only find that out through actually, these guys have been tested in the fire now before they actually get to the season opener. And that's nothing but a good thing.
All right, this from Dawg Pound Daily. 3 bold predictions for the Browns against the Eagles preseason week 2, Browns' 3rd preseason game. Number 3, Lonnie Phelps records a sack. That's a rookie undrafted free agent. Number 2, Ronnie Hickman gets a pick 6. Number 1, Austin Watkins tops 100 yards and a touchdown. Watkins is a guy that's gonna be a tough one. He's got the size that you like. He's been productive. I don't know if the numbers add up for him to be able to get a roster spot, and he might be productive enough. Somebody else comes and snatches him, and you can't put him on the practice squad.
Yeah, I'm here for the Austin Watkins hype train. And that's my exact thought is, he's performed so well. And you have to understand, he came straight out of football into football. Like, there wasn't an off season for him. He left Alabama Birmingham to come here, and he's already in football shape, and he's done nothing but route people up since he got here. But he might be putting too much on tape. If he's not able to latch onto the 53, I think he's shown enough that another team's probably going to take a flyer on him.
Yeah, and again, the young guy, the body type, he's big, he's got some quickness and some speed. This is interesting as well. The tightest competition for the 53-man, and Mac, who we use his tweets a lot, thinks it's the safety spot between DeAnthony Bell, Ronnie Hickman. Hickman flashed last game against Washington, 2 INTs. Bell last year was the first undrafted free agent to make the 53-man in the Barry era, logged 60% of the special teams snaps. The one thing I would, and somebody else pointed this out, and I think it's a valid point. Everything else being equal, Ronnie Hickman is 4 years younger, I think. Bell was an older guy, so you tend to err with the younger side because you think there's upside with it.
Yeah, that's the ultimate tiebreaker. I think Bell's 26 now, and he's only in his 2nd year. But if you watch that last game, they both brought different things to the table. Bell was flying around like a demon out there. And then, Hickman got his hand on 2 balls, that's valuable. I think the ultimate tiebreaker will come down to who can provide Bubba Ventrone more value on special teams. Because whoever that last safety is going to be, they're going to cut their teeth on the special teams, kick coverage units, stuff like that. But Hickman being younger, I think, gives him the edge.
Yeah, and Bell did show up a little bit on special teams. As he pointed out, 60% of his snaps were special teams, so he was a special teams guy. What are some of the other roster spots that you're intrigued to see? I like the signing of Jordan Wilkins. That's a young guy that's done some things with the Colts when given the opportunity.
Yeah, the 3rd string running back, whoever's going to be that 3rd down back, I think that's intriguing. I think still until someone takes it from him, I think it's going to be Felton's. But honestly, the most intriguing thing to me is what are they going to do with Alex Wright? Because that's going to open up a spot depending on how they handle his injury and depending on what his trajectory is to coming back. Because there's a lot of guys in that edge room, man, and they might be able to sneak someone on the roster if they use him as an IR designation to bring back or if he starts on the PUP. There's just a lot of moving pieces there that we don't know how they're going to play yet.
Marquise Goodwin is another one. We have heard no update on that, and that it concerns me that we haven't heard an update, to be honest.
The longer we go without an update, the more it looks like he might miss significant time, if not the entire season. Blood clots are nothing to play around with. He's dealt with this issue earlier in his career. Other athletes like Chris Bosh in the NBA was forced to retire from having blood clots. It's a serious issue. And the longer we go with not hearing anything, it leaves it like an unknown. Same thing with Harrison Bryant, though. We don't even know what the issue is with Harrison Bryant because it's medical and HIPAA prevents them from talking about it. But he hasn't been practicing. He hasn't been doing anything. So his spot might be up in the air as well.
Casey Kinnamon, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Casey.
Anytime, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Casey Kinnamon, make sure you check him out. Dawg Pound Daily. Really good stuff. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.